What if the technology we built to see the world is secretly blind to justice? What if the algorithms we trust to be objective are in fact perfect mirrors of our own worst prejudices? In 2024, a study found that over 83% of AI models used for psychiatric diagnoses were considered to have a high risk of bias. Another revealed that AI recruitment tools are 30% more likely to filter out candidates over 40. And in hiring, large language models were found to favor male names in 52% of cases. This isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. We are outsourcing perception, from hiring and justice to healthcare and our very identity, to machines that have learned to see inequality as data and to reproduce it as fact. Welcome to the era of Prejudice Pixels. Prepare to see the world through a lens you were never meant to notice. Hello world, and welcome back to Future Vision Talks. I'm Jordan. If that opening left you unsettled or even skeptical, then it did its job. Because the reality we just glimpsed isn't dystopian science fiction. It's happening right now, in real time, inside the apps on your phone, the systems that screen your resume, and the tools that might one day assist in your medical diagnosis. We call this investigation Prejudice Pixels. Today, we're going on a deep dive, a forensic examination of how artificial intelligence, particularly in seeing and interpreting our visual world, is perpetuating, amplifying, and even automating historical human bias on a scale we've never seen before. We'll move beyond the headlines and break down in clear terms how a supposedly neutral machine learns to discriminate. We'll look at the devastating real-world consequences, from courtroom injustices to healthcare disparities. We'll explore why most of us miss the bias even when it's staring us in the face. And crucially, we'll ask the tough philosophical questions. In our quest for automated efficiency, are we hard-coding our past mistakes into our future? And if the machine is reflecting our own flawed image back at us, where do we even begin to fix it? This is a story about code, about data, and ultimately about us. So let's begin. First, we must dismantle a fundamental myth that AI is neutral. We hear terms like machine learning and algorithm, and we think of cold, hard, impartial logic. But an AI system, especially one designed for image recognition, doesn't see or understand like you and I do. It has no context, no conscience, no lived experience. Its entire world is defined by its training data, millions, sometimes billions of images and their associated labels. Its sole purpose is to find patterns, correlations, and probabilities within that mountain of information. And therein lies the root of the problem. If you feed an algorithm a dataset where 80% of the images labeled CEO are white men in suits, it learns a pattern. CEO equals white plus male plus suit. It doesn't know this is a social and historical artifact of inequality. It just knows this is the strongest statistical signal. Show it a picture of a woman or a person of color in a CEO's role, and the signal is weaker. Its confidence drops. It's not being sexist or racist on purpose. It's being statistically accurate to the biased world it was shown. To understand how bias seeps in, experts often break it down into three interconnected layers. Think of it like building a house on a flawed foundation. Layer 1, data bias. This is the most discussed layer. Our training data, often scraped from the internet, is not a mirror of humanity. It's a mirror of who is online and what they post. It overrepresents certain demographics, voices, and perspectives. As researchers Emily Bender and Timnit Gebru warned, we risk creating a stochastic parrots, AI that mindlessly repeats the patterns, prejudices, and imbalances of its source material. If the web has more pictures of white men as doctors, the AI learns that pattern. It's that simple and that dangerous. Layer 2, model bias. This is subtler. It's not just what data is in, but how the algorithm interprets and amplifies it. Models can take small biases in the data and exaggerate them. They can also create their own spurious correlations. For example, if a dataset accidentally links darker skin tones with images labeled with negative emotions more often, the model might learn that skin color is a predictor of emotion, a catastrophic and false correlation. Layer 3, human bias. We are the architects. Bias enters in the choices we make, which datasets to use, how to label images, what problems to solve. When creating massive image sets like ImageNet, researchers were shocked to find racist and sexist labels that had been applied by human taggers. Furthermore, the teams building these systems are famously non-diverse. When the creators lack diverse perspectives, they are more likely to miss the biases that will harm marginalized groups. As the AI Now Institute report states, the lack of diversity in the AI workforce and the bias in AI systems are two sides of the same coin. So we have skewed data, interpreted by an amoral pattern magnifier designed by homogeneous teams. This is the perfect engine for producing what researchers call worst group error, where the system fails catastrophically for minority subgroups in the data. Now, let's see this engine in action. Theoretical models are one thing. Concrete harm is another. Let's walk through the real-world consequences, starting in a place that determines livelihoods, the job market. Meet Derek Mobley. In 2023, he sued Workday, a major HR software company, alleging its AI screening tool discriminated against him based on his race, age, and disability. In May 2025, a judge allowed his age discrimination claim to proceed as a collective action. This case could become a blueprint for holding companies accountable for algorithmic hiring bias. But the bias isn't just in the resume scan. It's in the very image of professionalism. A recent study found AI tools giving lower professionalism and intelligence scores to images of Black women with natural hairstyles like braids. Another found LinkedIn's algorithm historically suggested male alternatives when users searched for female names. These systems aren't evaluating skill, they're encoding cultural stereotypes about who looks the part. Perhaps no case is more infamous than Compass. Used in U.S. courtrooms to predict a defendant's risk of reoffending, a 2016 ProPublica analysis found it was deeply racially biased. Black defendants were almost twice as likely to be incorrectly labeled as high risk compared to white defendants. Conversely, white defendants were more often incorrectly labeled as low risk. Think about the moral weight of that error. A human judge's bias might affect one case, but an algorithmic bias, baked into software used across the country, systematizes that injustice. It gives the aura of scientific certainty to a profoundly unjust outcome. If bias in hiring costs people opportunities, bias in healthcare can cost lives. And the evidence here is just as stark. A landmark study published in Science found a healthcare algorithm used on over 200 million Americans was significantly favoring white patients over Black patients. Why? It used healthcare costs as a proxy for need. Because Black patients historically face barriers to care and spend less, the algorithm wrongly assumed they were healthier. The study estimated this bias more than halved the number of Black patients identified for extra care. This is the insidious logic of Prejudice Pixels. It mistakes historical inequity, less money spent on Black patients, for a factual baseline. Black patients are less sick. It then automates that mistake, creating a dangerous feedback loop that could widen the very health gaps we're trying to close. This is the insidious logic of Prejudice Pixels. It mistakes historical inequity, less money spent on Black patients, for a factual baseline. Black patients are less sick. It then automates that mistake, creating a dangerous feedback loop that could widen the very health gaps we're trying to close. You don't need to be in a courtroom or hospital to encounter this. It's in the tools we use for creativity and connection. Image generators. Ask DALL-E or Stable Diffusion for a CEO, and despite improvements, you'll still see a heavy bias toward white males. These models are literally visualizing our stereotypes, then feeding them back into our culture. Social media. Remember Twitter's image cropping algorithm? It consistently favored white faces over black faces in previews. They didn't program it to be racist. It learned from human engagement data what was salient. It took public outrage for them to scrap it. Facial recognition. Joy Buolamwini's groundbreaking Gender Shades project proved commercial facial analysis tools had error rates below 1% for light-skinned men, but soared to over 34% for dark-skinned women. If you're a black woman, your phone might not unlock, or you might be misidentified by surveillance. The technology is not built for you. Here's one of the most troubling findings of all. Most people cannot identify AI bias, even when it's shown to them in the training data. In a Penn State study, participants were shown skewed training data like this. Most didn't perceive it as biased. They only started to notice when the AI's performance was skewed, when it started misclassifying the emotions of black faces. Black participants were more sensitive to the bias, especially when it portrayed their own group negatively. Let that sink in. We are psychologically primed to trust the machine's objectivity. We look at its output, not its inputs. This is a massive failure of what we might call algorithmic literacy, and it makes us all vulnerable.
When we hear bias, we might think of an occasional error, a bug to be patched. But this is a systemic feature of current AI. Its consequences ripple out far beyond individual cases. Erosion of trust. If people from marginalized groups learn that facial recognition doesn't work for them, or that hiring algorithms filter them out, or that medical AI underestimates their pain, why would they trust these institutions? AI bias doesn't just produce bad decisions, it corrodes the very legitimacy of the systems that use it. Amplification of stereotypes. Generative AI is now a content creation engine. If it persistently generates nurses as women and CEOs as men, it is actively reinforcing these stereotypes for a new generation, shaping perceptions in a way that is hard to counteract. The feedback loop of inequality. Biased hiring, fewer diverse hires, less diverse teams building the next AI, more biased AI. It's a vicious cycle that can cement social stratification. Which brings us to the deep, uncomfortable, philosophical questions at the heart of this. We are in the process of a great delegation. We are outsourcing more and more human judgment in hiring, lending, policing, medicine to algorithmic systems. If an AI is trained on the entirety of human history and data, can it ever be truly fair, or is it doomed to repeat our mistakes? Is a fair AI one that reflects the world as it has been, or one that helps us build the world as it should be? When a biased AI makes a harmful decision, who is responsible? The programmer who wrote the code? The company that deployed it without adequate testing? The society that produced the skewed data? The law right now is struggling to catch up. What are we optimizing for? AI excels at optimizing for efficiency, cost reduction, and statistical accuracy. But justice, equity, and fairness are not statistically normative concepts. They are moral ones. Can we encode morality into math?
This research from MIT Sloan argues that AI's statistical nature makes it bad at handling moral dilemmas. It identifies uniquely human skills, empathy, presence, opinion, judgment, creativity, and hope, EPIC, as irreplaceable complements to AI. The question isn't just how to make AI less biased, but what decisions should we never fully delegate to AI in the first place? This isn't a hopeless problem. Brilliant researchers, activists, and even some in industry are working on solutions. But there is no single magic fix. It requires a multi-front attack. Better, more representative data. The obvious start. actively curating diverse data sets, auditing for historical bias, and in some cases, creating synthetic data to balance representation. Smarter debiasing techniques. Researchers at MIT have developed a method that doesn't just randomly balance data, but identifies and removes the specific data points that contribute most to failures on minority groups. This improves fairness while removing far less data, preserving overall accuracy. Bias detection tools. Tools like Google's What If tool allow developers to probe their models for unfair outcomes across different subgroups. Rigorous, standardized bias auditing needs to become as routine as security testing. Diversify the builders. As the AI Now Institute argues, you cannot fix biased systems built by homogeneous teams. We need diversity of gender, race, ethnicity, disability, and socioeconomic background at all levels, from engineering to ethics to product management. Radical transparency. Companies must move beyond secrecy. This means clearer documentation of training data sources, known limitations, and the results of bias audits. The black box must become a glass box. Meaningful human oversight. AI should be a decision support tool, not a decision-making tool in high-stakes areas. A human must always be in the loop, empowered to question and override algorithmic recommendations. The rising tide of regulation. The legal landscape is shifting. New York City's AI hiring law, the EU's AI Act, and cases like the Workday lawsuit are setting precedents. The 2025 AI Index report notes a significant global increase in AI-related regulations. Setting standards. We need industry-wide standards for what constitutes a fair and adequate bias test. Governments and international bodies have a role to play in establishing these baselines. The path forward isn't just technical, it's cultural. It requires shifting from a mindset of move fast and break things to one of measure carefully and build justly. It requires all of us, developers, companies, regulators, and users, to demand better. So, where does this leave us? We've seen that prejudiced pixels are not an abstract concept. They are digital scars, encoded reflections of our unequal world, now given agency and scale by artificial intelligence. The image recognition systems we've focused on today are just one lens. These same principles of biased data leading to biased outcomes apply to large language models, audio processors, and predictive analytics everywhere. This is the foundational challenge of the AI era. We stand at a crossroads. One path leads to a future where inequality is not just social and economic, but algorithmically enforced, hardwired into the digital infrastructure of our lives. The other path demands vigilance, responsibility, and a commitment to building technology that serves all of humanity, not just its historically dominant subsets. Here is my final question for you, and I genuinely want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. We've taught our machines to see the world through our data. Now, the harder task. Can we teach them, and perhaps in the process, remind ourselves how to see it justly? If this exploration of our algorithmic reality challenged your perspective, please hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that content with depth and consequence matters. Share this video with one person who needs to be part of this conversation, a colleague, a student, a policymaker, and to join us as we continue to fearlessly interrogate the technologies shaping our tomorrow, subscribe to Future Vision Talks and ring the notification bell. We are not passive passengers in this future. We are its co-authors. Let's write a better chapter. I'm Jordan. Thank you for watching, for thinking, and for caring. Until next time, stay vigilant.